What happens to us after we die? Do we cease to exist? Are we judged for our actions and sent to the pearly gates or the fiery pit? Or do we live on? Is it possible that we are on an endless journey for knowledge and self-improvement? Or is this place that we call Earth our eternal punishment? This is what we'll attempt to document. Welcome to the Regression Session. My name is Ian, and welcome back to the Regression Session. Today we'll be hearing from Tia, and Tia is a professional chakra reader and chakra healer. She has some very unique perspectives on spirituality, energy, and even religion, and I'm excited to have her on the show to talk about her views. If you've had an experience and would like to be on the show, or would like me to tell your story, email me. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get right into today's show. Hey Tia, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to hear you talk about this for the podcast. I know we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but tell me a little bit about what it is that you do.
So I started out just as a traditional astrologer that did astrology readings for people. And I actually went through my Kundalini Awakening, and different people have different definitions of what that is. For me, a Kundalini Awakening is like the spontaneous forcing open of your chakras, and it's a really intense experience. So I was going through that, and I developed new abilities that I never had before. And one of them was the ability to see chakra blockages in an astrology chart. And so my sessions pretty much gradually changed as I was seeing clients. I started offering different kinds of services. And now what I do is I do look at someone's natal chart, and I look at 16 placements in the natal chart. But I don't just tell them, oh, I see these blockages in your chart. I do that, but I also ask them a lot of questions that their spirit guides are urging me to ask them, and kind of leading them to draw their own conclusions. So it's almost like a therapy session, in that, a therapist is always like, and how did that make you feel? And I'm kind of like, and where did this originate from? Where does this, like, I'll address certain things that I see in their chart that are kind of like, behavioral patterns that they have. Everyone has kind of self-destructive behavioral patterns that are keeping them from being their best possible self. And I'll kind of like point those out to them, and I'll ask them, like, where did this originate from? And it's kind of like, once they get thinking about that and they see it, they can't unsee it. So it's like I'm guiding them through shadow work, because shadow work is just seeing things about yourself that you normally wouldn't. It's discovering all these subconscious thoughts and unconscious emotions that are kind of playing out in your life in ways that you're not even recognizing. So that's what I do.
Wow, that's fascinating. And you just brought up a whole mess of things that I didn't even know exist. But did you always kind of believe in chakras and things like that?
Well, I've been passionate about astrology since I was a child. Like, I was 10 years old when I started kind of being obsessed with it. And I always had psychic gifts from the time I can, as far back as I can remember. And my mom always kind of knew that I was a little different. So she always encouraged me to explore the metaphysical. She had a lot of books about different metaphysical stuff, and she would take me to the psychic fairs and we would watch shows about it. And I always was aware of chakras, but I was never interested in them, oddly enough. And so, it was very spontaneous when I started seeing the chakras in the astrology charts. And I've always been clairsentient, where you can feel energy and like kind of read it like a meter, and kind of like pick up on other people's physical feelings and emotional feelings like it's your own, and kind of like pick up on the history of a location when you walk into it. I've always had that ability of kind of reading energy. And it just kind of ties in with the chakras because they're energy centers. So the more aware I became of chakras, the more I was able to like, it was almost very like much a way for me to establish energetic boundaries, because now instead of me being this emotional sponge, this energetic sponge where I'm taking on all this stuff that isn't mine and having a lot of social anxiety, now suddenly I could be like, oh, this isn't mine. This is this person's issues, and it's emanating from this chakra blockage. So it was actually something that helped me navigate the world more comfortably.
Wow, that's fascinating. And it sounds like your mom was really supportive, and a lot of people don't have that when they or maybe are a little different when they're growing up. So I'm happy for you that you had a mom that supported you in that.
Absolutely, because I think that everyone has some kind of psychic gifts, and they're strongest when we're children, but we're encouraged to think that it's make believe, like kids that are clairvoyant, they might see stuff, and the grown-ups are like, oh, that's your imagination. You're not seeing that. A lot of times I think children who have an imaginary friend, they really are connecting with their spirit guides. And so I really try to encourage people. That's one thing that I can see in people's chakras, is not only like their blockages, but which chakras of theirs are the strongest, because the different clairs are associated with the different chakras. So, you're based on your strongest chakras. Not only will that determine your strongest physical sense, it'll also determine your strongest clair, and they kind of go hand in hand with one another. Like someone who has really poor vision is not likely to have clairvoyance. um, so what I try to do is I will try to tell people what their strongest clairs are going to be and how they can strengthen them so that they can connect with their spirit guides on their journey.
That's amazing. And, I definitely want to circle back to the spirit guides. But, kind of rewinding a little bit, did with your mom supporting you, did she help you get involved in this field, or how did you become involved in actually doing these readings for people? And um, obviously, we talked a little bit about how it was kind of like a spontaneous thing where you could start seeing these chakra blockages and things like that. But how did you become involved in actually taking on people to do these readings and getting involved in this field?
It was, I mean, I guess you could say it was a freak accident, or you could say it was destiny. Um, my mom did try to help me get into the astrology business when I was only like 19 years old. And it's crazy because this was before social media was a thing. This was like maybe the year 2000, 2001, when she started trying to like tell her friends and her like coworkers about me. And she was there, kind of trying to like drum up business for me. And so I lived in a really small town in like rural Ohio. And without the internet, pretty much the only people that I could sell my services to were people who I already knew. And I didn't know that many people. There just wasn't a way to market myself. So eventually, like, I kind of hit a wall where I'd done readings for literally everyone that I knew. I was even doing readings on message boards for people for free, just because I loved doing readings so much. But I kind of hit a wall where I wasn't able to attract more clients, and I kind of gave up on my dream. Flash forward year 2018, I had just gone through a divorce, and I was a single mom, and I was in a new city, and I was working as a housekeeper at a hotel, and all these little things were coming up in my life that were making me feel like I was going to be losing that job. It was kind of like the universe was ripping me from that job. Not at first. At first, I loved the job. I actually loved cleaning, and my managers loved me, and everything was all great. But, when you raise your vibration, you cannot stay in a lot of the relationships or circumstances that you were previously in. And so the universe will remove people and jobs and living circumstances. It'll just remove stuff from your life that's no longer a vibrational match for you. So as I was going through my Kundalini Awakening and strengthening my gifts in ways they never were before, I literally could not do that job anymore because I was meant to be doing something else. And I knew it, but I did not know what I was supposed to do. And I was so frustrated. I just started praying. I was just like, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing right now, but I will do whatever it is that I am meant to be doing right now. I just need some kind of sign. And within a week, I had like 5 different strangers on the internet, on like some from a metaphysical forum I was on, and others from like my Facebook, just my regular personal Facebook, just people that knew that I loved astrology, which I had been talking about on the internet for 18 years, randomly messaged me, and they're like, do you do readings, and how much would you charge? And I'm like, I guess that's my sign, And so I started an Etsy back then, and within a few weeks, I was so booked up on the Etsy, I had no choice but to put in my 2-week notice. And, I have a lot of clients that are going through a Kundalini awakening, a spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of them are like, I just got a divorce, or I just lost my job of 10 years, or like all this stuff, like crazy stuff happens, and I'm just like, congratulations, because when something is removed from your life, it always means that something else better is coming. So, that's human nature. We're all creatures of habit, and we all struggle with this attachment. And so our natural instinct when life is taking something from us is to cling desperately to it, hold on to it for dear life, and to not welcome change, and to just want the familiar. So if you can accept that life is the only thing that's consistent about life is that it's not consistent at all, and you can just go with the flow, it makes everything so much easier.
Yeah. It's almost like fighting against a river current,
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about what exactly are chakras. Like, from my basic knowledge, I know that they're energy wells or energy centers in the body, but could you tell me a little bit more about what they actually are?
I really don't know. Like, I don't know how to explain it to people in a way that would make more sense to them logically. All I can really say is that they are energy centers, because everything in the universe is made up of energy. And the chakras, I don't think that we will ever really know exactly how many chakras a person has. And like, people argue about that constantly and have different numbers, but I can say that I personally work with 10 of the chakras. I work with the 7 main chakras of the Rainbow Bridge that everyone's heard of, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet ones. And also the Earth Star chakra, which is what anchors us into the earth. The Soul Star chakra, which is what people think of as their higher self. It's like a higher dimension of consciousness. And also the High Heart chakra, which is kind of like a unity consciousness. And the different chakras are, in fact, different dimensions of consciousness. And you can actually move up and down the chakras depending on your state of mind. So, the saying energy flows where attention goes, energy flows. That's the basic idea. Your Kundalini energy is going to go wherever your attention is, wherever your mental focus is. So the dimensions of consciousness are just different states of mind that you can be in. And obviously, when you're awake, you're in the third dimension of consciousness, and you're connecting with the external physical outer world through your 5 physical senses. When you're asleep, or when you're meditating, or when you're being hypnotized, these are different levels of consciousness that can take you to different chakras. But what you can eventually do is train yourself so that you can kind of be in different levels of consciousness simultaneously. And this is what the yogis are basically trying to do, when they go off and meditate alone in a cave for hours or whatever it is they do. They're trying to learn how to stay there, basically. One thing I can compare it to, and a way that a lot of people connect with these different chakras that they don't normally connect with in their day-to-day waking life, when they're in the third dimension of consciousness, is when people take hallucinogenic drugs, like when people have an ayahuasca ceremony, or when people do magic mushrooms or something like that. That is opening up the third eye. That's why you're hallucinating. And that's opening up other dimensions of consciousness. And what some people learn is, they have multiple ayahuasca ceremonies or something like that with a shaman, and that person kind of guides them through it. And they learn that they can get back there on their own without any drugs, because we naturally have DMT in our minds. And it's kind of like if someone were to show you something that you've never seen before, someone were to take you to some special location, some secret garden, and you would see it, and then seeing it is believing it. And then you could eventually find your own way back there now that you know that it exists. It's kind of like that. So some people do rely on different ceremonies like that just to figure out what it feels like to be in that state of consciousness. And then through meditation or astral projection or dream work or different things like that, they learn how to get back there more organically.
And yeah, that's incredible. And, I've done some research into, different hallucinogens like psilocybin mushrooms or ayahuasca, DMT, things like that. Because traditionally I'm a science guy, right? I'm the kind of guy that I have to see it to believe it. So I did a lot of research into this, and I found out that kind of like what you said, as far as like the scientific explanation of that is when people are taking these drugs, they're like the neurological connections in their brain, they just explode by like exponential numbers. So not only are they're not necessarily hallucinating, they're just pulling in more information. They're able to gather more information with their traditional senses, right? So I can definitely understand, from a science point of things, and what you're saying from the third eye, I definitely see how those two can connect.
Yeah, and I've noticed that different drugs influence different chakras. It's kind of interesting because, I've had people ask me, like, is drug addiction, which chakra issue is that? And I'm like, well, it actually depends on the drug. Like, someone who's addicted to uppers has a different kind of chakra blockage than someone who's addicted to downers does. So it's really interesting how the different drugs affect the different chakras like that.
Yeah, it is. And I guess there's a lot of different drugs out there. Um, how many different types of chakras are there that could potentially be affected by drugs like that?
Well, your whole entire body is affected by it. I believe that, well, and when I say your whole body, I mean like all of the chakras are affected by it. But I believe that everything that we're taking in is affecting our chakra system, whether that's the drugs we're doing, the foods we're eating, the conversations we're having, the energetic exchanges with people, the people we're intimate with, the news we're watching, like all of that affects our chakras, and people don't realize that they go both ways. Your chakras affect your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your outer world circumstances. They affect your finances, they affect your relationships. But the outer world influences your chakras as well. Like, I was talking to someone the other day about how if you live with a lot of stress and anxiety, that is damaging your solar plexus chakra. And if your solar plexus chakra is already damaged, that causes you to have even more stress and anxiety in different situations that other people could handle a lot easier. So, it's a back and forth thing. Kind of like you'll never know, is it the chicken or the egg? Are we influencing our outer world with our chakras, or is the outer world influencing us with our chakras? It's so much of both that you don't really know where it ends and where it begins. So because we don't really have control of the outer world that much, we think we do. That's the ego thinking that we can control the outer world. But the reason why we can't is because everyone has free will and everyone's going to do what they want to do. So we don't really have control over the outer world because it's such a group effort to what happens. The only thing we do have control of is our own state of being, our own emotions, our own mentality. And so if you can balance all of that within yourself and find that inner peace, that is going to influence everything in the outer world, because you're going to attract people who are on the same wavelength you are. That's one thing that people notice when they do start to really clear these chakra blockages is old relationships with friends, family members, lovers will not last anymore. Like these people, sometimes they'll be violently ripped from your life, not violently ripped from your life, but it'll be like, you'll get in a blow up fight with them. They'll have a falling out with them. Other times it's more subtle, like you just slowly drift apart and you think that, oh, they're busy, I'm busy. Or sometimes you'll try to make plans with them and the plans will keep falling through. And like you literally will not be able to maintain relationships with people that you had when you were damaged, when you had these wounds that needed healed. Like once you heal, you're not going to be able to connect on the same level with those that haven't done that inner work. So definitely that's why the one and only thing we can do to affect change in the outer world is to be the change.
Yeah. And that, just thinking from like an average point of view, that almost sounds a little scary, to think that, just maintaining yourself and building yourself up might make you lose. Or I mean, I guess lose is a harsh word, but fall.
It's terrifying for people.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking about like, what if I didn't get along with my dad or my best friend anymore, and so that's definitely something that, like, the first thing that popped in my mind when you were talking about that. So it seems like this is, really important to consider. And my question for you is, how can average people interact with, or maybe unlock, I don't know if that's the best word, or just maintain their chakra?
The best thing that people can do is to just regularly practice meditation. And I have to say a disclaimer, there is this whole trend of guided meditation, which is an oxymoron. For you to meditate, you have to disconnect from the outer world and any distractions and anything that is bringing your attention to the outer world, even if it's like you're using your ears to physically hear something, that's a distraction, and that's keeping you tied to something outside of yourself, and it's blocking you from going within. So, some people meditate by sitting completely still, and it's kind of like they're so still that they trick their mind into thinking that their body is asleep. Other people meditate in motion, because if you do something that you've done a million times and it's kind of like a routine, like say you walk down the same path to go on this quiet walk in the same way every single afternoon at 2 p.m. Or let's say every morning you wash dishes and sweep your kitchen floor, your mind is going to go on autopilot. And your conscious mind is going to be so focused on your physical movements, because the conscious mind rules movements. It's going to be so focused on what you're doing physically, but you won't have to be thinking about what you're doing, because you've got it down to just like, you don't have to give it any conscious thought at all, because it's something that you've done so many times through routine that what happens is your mind starts to wander. And everyone's experienced that, where they're doing some set routine thing and their mind completely wanders and they start to daydream. Well, daydreaming is like the beginning stage. You let your mind wander where it will and you start to daydream. The problem is most people think that daydreaming is wrong, and they are taught focus, pay attention, and they're almost addicted to outer stimuli. Like they have to be doing multiple things at once. They have to have multiple windows open on their computer. They have to be listening to a podcast while they're driving. They have to be doing this while doing that. And they never just stop to do one thing at a time. But if you stop to do one thing long enough and you allow yourself to daydream, it'll go deeper and deeper, and eventually you'll be in that meditative state. And when you get in that meditative state, a lot of subconscious thoughts and unconscious emotions are going to come up to the surface, which terrifies people. People are terrified of change, and people are terrified of what we call the shadow self, the subconscious and unconscious things about ourselves that we've purposely been repressing. People have been repressing it and not wanting to deal with it and distracting themselves from it. So if you can allow yourself to face that part of yourself, that is going to release it. The more you repress it, the more it's blocking the chakras. The chakras are blocked by very low vibrational, heavy, negative thoughts that we have about ourselves, and emotions and desires and emotional pain and desires that we don't think we can have, all this stuff that we don't want to feel, that we've kind of buried. That's what blocks the chakras. So just becoming aware of it and doing that bit of shadow work is what releases it and clears the chakras.
So when we're meditating, a lot of the time when I've tried it, because I've definitely tried it a bunch of different times, and I'll find myself just kind of having my mind wander, because I've tried it where I've kind of sat cross-legged, maybe on like my bed or on the floor or something like that, and my mind will just start to wander and pick on different trains of thought, right? And I've always thought that was the wrong way to meditate.
Yeah, a lot of people think that.
So is that a misconception then?
Absolutely. And a lot of people think that meditating means to meditate on something, and they don't realize that they're using their conscious mind and staying very much in the 3D. They think that they're supposed to focus on their breathing, or they're supposed to like focus on, I don't even know what they're trying to focus on, but they're just trying to exert control. And they're very much in their conscious mind. The conscious mind is all about focus and attention. We're using our conscious mind when we're reading some kind of instruction manual, and we're using our conscious mind when we're listening to a teacher talking in class. And we're so wired to only use our conscious minds and to almost feel guilty about daydreaming. And so it's something that people get wrong even when they meditate, is that desire to control their minds and to focus. And that's not what meditating is at all.
So your view on meditation is more not necessarily trying to gain control over yourself, but just maybe allowing yourself an opportunity to lose control, or
Right.
or lose the illusion of control.
Right. It's detachment. And it's basically sleep. It's like what happens when you're sleeping. It's dreaming while fully awake. It's being fully lucid while awake. When you're dreaming, a lot of stuff comes up that can't come up during the day because you won't let it. And so that's another great way to do shadow work and clear the chakras, is to start trying to keep a dream journal. A lot of people don't even remember most of their dreams. We dream every night, but a lot of people have trouble remembering their dreams. And the reason why is because the very moment they wake up, what do? They check their phone, they start thinking about their day. And so they've instantly gone back into the 3D, and they're instantly focused on the physical world the moment they wake up. So if you can get in the habit of lying there just quietly for a few minutes when you first wake up, and holding on to your dream and remembering it, and then writing it down immediately, that really helps. And you'll start to notice almost like a deja vu, and you'll start having lucid dreams more, and you'll start noticing within your dreams, when you become lucid, you'll actually have like dream deja vu, where you're like, whoa, I've dreamed about this place or this circumstance over and over and over again, but I never remember it when I wake up. And then you'll finally remember it when you wake up. So that's one way, is to just start exploring your dreams, because your dreams have the same symbols over and over and over and over again, just trying so hard to get your conscious awareness to it, but we forget our dreams so often. Or if you can go to that place when you're meditating, when you've let go of all control, like when you're asleep, then you can access the stuff that you would normally dream about while wide awake, because you're allowing your mind to go there.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And, one question that I do have, and, this is a little bit back about the dream journal. Would you recommend like a physical pen and paper or pencil and paper journal versus your phone maybe? Or do you think it really matters as long as you can just get it down?
I don't think it matters. I mean, different things probably work better for different people. Me personally, I don't like to put things on my phone, because then I'll be tempted to check my email or check check the news, check something
Right.
like that. It'll just be like, oh, I want to Google who that actor was. Like, every time I'm on my phone, I just think of a million different things I could be doing on it. So I don't like to use my phone for stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's exactly why I asked too, just to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, another great thing for the chakras is if people can do automatic writing, which a lot of people, I've tried to teach them how to do automatic writing for their chakras. And they're like, well, I sit down to write and I can't think of anything. And I'm like, yeah, you're not supposed to be thinking. There's a huge difference between automatic writing and journaling. And personally, I feel like journaling is toxic, and it keeps people stuck in a bad place, because you're basically just writing down all those, all the negative self-talk that is in your conscious mind that you're thinking all the time, you're writing it down. And there's something very, very powerful about writing stuff down. When you write something down, like it's a tool for manifestation. You're writing it into existence. You're taking your thoughts and you're making them into a tangible physical thing when you write them down. So if you're writing down all the negative self-talk of your conscious mind, you're kind of just like solidifying it as a real thing. With automatic writing, you're not thinking at all. You're writing faster than you can think, faster than you can edit yourself. And it's not coming from you, it's coming through you. So automatic writing is allowing that higher self, that higher level of consciousness to write things down. And it's very shocking if you're able to do it, if you're able to like meditate on the page and have that stream of consciousness. You will see stuff written down that you did not know you were holding on to, things that you didn't think you were so angry about. You will write down things that you didn't even remember, things from your childhood that you forgot, and you'll see how it perfectly ties into what you're doing now and how you're kind of repeating your own history. You'll see desires that you never even allowed yourself to acknowledge that you had. So automatic writing is a great form of shadow work, but people just, again, have to let go of control, and people are like, I can't think of what to write, or they want to dictate what they're going to write down. That's the same as people not allowing themselves to meditate.
Gotcha. So yeah, so more same along the same line as meditation, it's giving up that illusion of of controlling the situation.
Right.
Right. And I do have a question about, you mentioned your higher, I guess, plane of consciousness. Is that the same thing as a spirit guide? Because I know we talked about spirit guides a little bit earlier, but I definitely want to circle back around to that, because that's right there is like a super, super interesting vein for me to dive into, as spirit guides.
Yeah, I don't really see other people saying this, but I had an experience where, as someone who's clairaudient, ever since I was a little girl, I've, heard my spirit guides. And there was this one spirit guide in particular that I would just hear in my head as my own voice. And the difference was, I always knew that it was a part of me, but yet it wasn't. It was like a different part of me than the regular everyday part of me. And that was kind of like my experience of the imaginary friend, where I would be talking to myself and even laughing with myself. And that kind of freaked the grown-ups out. Like, why are you talking to yourself? That's something only crazy people do. And I remember naming that part of myself to distinguish it from me, because even though it sounded just like me thinking in my own head, it just sounded like my own inner voice, I somehow knew, like, this is a different aspect of me. This is some part of me that knows stuff that I couldn't possibly know. So I gave her a name. And as I got older and I was going through my whole Kundalini Awakening, I remember new guides coming in that had never been there before. And I remember asking questions about who they were and them identifying themselves to me. And then I remember one of my other guides telling me that, I had named my spirit guide Emily, that I had heard since I was a very little girl. And I remember them saying, Emily is you, right? And just getting chills, like, what? And then I finally figured out that we all have this higher self that's guiding us. And it's what people would call your main spirit guide. They always say you have a main spirit guide that's with you from the time you're born. Other spirit guides come into your life in different points to help you with different things. But you have this main spirit guide. And it's also what people refer to as your guardian angel.
Yeah, see, this is fascinating to me. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the first interview I did with Taylor, but I actually do past life regressions for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I regressed her personally. And we had this experience. I'm going to have her back on the show to talk about this, but I was trying to do a past life regression for myself. And I saw this little girl, and the memory kind of is blurry now, but she had like red hair with braids going down her shoulders. She was wearing some really plain, almost like overalls, but it was like a dress, and like black shoes. And every time I've gone under into a regression, I've seen what I would consider to be, or what I thought immediately upon seeing it, a spirit guide. He's a giant, like 7 foot tall owl. And if you look into his eyes look like staring into the night sky. So as soon as I saw this little girl, I said out loud, "I'm not supposed to be here." And then I immediately came back up to the surface, or back to full consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fast forward, I regressed my friend Taylor, and this same little girl showed up in her regression. And we ended up speaking with this little girl. But towards the end, this little girl started, I think that she started, talking a little bit too much about what happens after we die. And so Taylor's spirit guide, she told me that her spirit guide was pulling on some kind of a like a cord attached to this little girl's back, and like trying to almost like pull her away from talking to me. So that's so interesting to me that, that happened, because, and then he kind of chastised Taylor and put his finger in her face. And I actually asked permission if I could bring Taylor back up to the surface. And he had climbed up a staircase, an invisible staircase, opened up a door just out of nowhere and walked through it. And then when I asked permission to bring her back out, he opened the door and made a shooing motion with his hands and then slammed the door shut. So
yeah, they will definitely block us from stuff that we don't need to know. Everything is like on a need to know basis, because there's so much stuff that we want to know, but if we didn't know it too soon, it would really mess up everything for us. So somehow they know what we can and can't handle. And we know everything exactly when we're meant to know it. When we're ready to know it is when we'll know it.
Yeah, and that's kind of the feeling that I got too, is that that little girl spilled the beans a little bit too early. And and when I talked to Taylor about her guide, and I talked to her about it multiple times, she's told me that if it almost felt to her like having a significant other, like,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like part of her, but not her. Would you say that is like a separate entity, or just your higher consciousness? Because that's where I'm a little confused on the spirit guide thing.
I don't even know if I should go into this or not, but
Well, whatever you're comfortable with. You don't have to
yeah.
talk about anything you don't want to.
We talked about, before we started this, we talked about how we might get into like our religious beliefs or background. So I grew up in a Baptist church, and I grew up like really, really into the Bible. And I actually left the church because they didn't accept my psychic gifts or my obsession with astrology. They were like very against anything that was related to divination and thought it was like of the devil. So for a long time, I considered myself spiritual but not religious. And I left the church because I didn't feel welcome there. And it was only after my spiritual awakening that my guides were like, you need to read the Bible again now that you will have a deeper understanding of it than you ever could have before. And now I see so much in the Bible about the universal laws and about the chakras and about astrology. Like, it's all in the Bible. If you know how to read it, like, it's all coded in there. And you kind of have to be at a certain level of consciousness to even understand it. Someone who's not ready for it won't understand it, and they'll see it in very simplistic terms. Like, they won't be able to grasp these concepts. And so a lot of stuff in the Bible about your husband. Um, I believe like, and when it talks about the marriage and it talks about like devotion to the husband, I feel like that is about our souls are all feminine in nature. We all have divine feminine and divine masculine energy. And our souls are the part of us that's very, very human. That's the part of us that's feminine, and that's the part of us that rules the physical body and the lower chakras. And the masculine part of us is our higher self, and that higher consciousness. And that kind of ties in with Mother Earth and Father Sky and all of that. And so I feel like a lot of the passages in the Bible that people think, oh, that's completely sexist, that's like patriarchy and all that, that's how it's been twisted around. And what it actually is talking about is devotion to the husband, is devotion to your higher self. And your relationship with your higher self should be the most important relationship you ever have, because it's going to influence every relationship you have with everyone else. If you don't have a good relationship with your higher self, you will have dysfunctional relationships with everyone you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's powerful right there. You can't love others until you've learned to love yourself. That's what I've always thought.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you've really given me a lot to think about. um, it sounds like being involved in this field has really affected your beliefs a lot.
I don't know if it has. I think it's just kind of broadened beliefs that were already there, maybe.
Or like solidified the beliefs that you thought you had, maybe.
Yeah. Because I mean, I growing up in the church, I always, even before I started going to church, I always felt very, very spiritual. I always knew there was a higher power because I could feel it. And when I started going to church, it wasn't because anyone in my immediate family went. I started going when I was like 6 or 7. And it was actually because my mom was dating this guy, and his sister and mother were going to this church, had gone to this church all along. And they invited me to go one Sunday. And I just kind of became obsessed because my mom and my grandparents who were raising me, they were very agnostic. They're kind of like, there's something out there, but we don't know anything about it. And they didn't really talk about it at all. And I had so many questions. I had tons of questions about spirituality and about God, and they didn't really answer it. So when I started going to church, I'm like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. Like, this is where I can talk about this stuff. And like, I just really took to it. But when people started telling me that like what I was doing was evil, I never really believed that, and there was never any point in my life where I became like anti-Christianity or lost my faith. It was more like I just felt anti people in the church and felt that they were small-minded. And I guess I still kind of feel that way today, that no religion is wrong and no religious doctrine is wrong. It's just people's interpretation of it that can be wrong, because some people use it to discriminate or to hate or to be very divisive or elitist. And that's pretty much missing the entire point of it. So, I'm very open-minded to all the religions, and I actually believe they're all saying the same thing pretty much. Being into the chakras, I of course started looking into Hinduism and Buddhism and how they're related to the chakras, but I also noticed how they're very much related to what was in the Bible and how it's all connected. And even looking at stuff like the Kabbalah, the ancient mystical Judaism, the 10 chakras that I look at all correspond with the 10 Sephiro and the Kabbalah tree of life. So I kind of just see how it's all saying the same thing. in different languages, different ways that different people can connect with it. And it's really unfortunate that more people don't notice that it's all the same, and they kind of have this belief that you have to choose the right way, like all paths lead you there.
Yeah. And, that's the way I look at religion is just like a bunch of different humans trying to make everything fit into a different size box.
I think it's different people trying to make sense of what they're experiencing. But the sad thing is, you have all these mystics and these prophets and these religious leaders, and they were probably having a Kundalini awakening, and they were probably experiencing all this stuff that a lot of us are experiencing now. And they were writing about it. They were probably doing automatic writing and channeling, and so, they're sharing all this with the world, and the people that are following them are not in a mind state to understand it. So it's kind of like you have to go through your Kundalini awakening as well to be on the same wavelength as these spiritual leaders and really understand what it is that they are trying to say. And then you're like, oh, I get it now. I mean, I think we're all prophets. It's just, are we going to get there this lifetime, or is it going to take us a while?
That brings me to the question that, I pretty much ask everybody. So what is it that you think happens to us after we do die or pass on?
I think it's just based on the individual. I absolutely believe in reincarnation, and I always have. For some reason, I remember being a very little girl and believing in reincarnation before I even had the language for it. It's like it wasn't something that I heard or was explained to me. It's just a feeling that I had that we've all been here before. But I do think that if you reach a point where, well, I think that everyone has a choice, in life and in death. I think that everything is a choice. Everything is determined by our own free will. And I think that it's a choice to come back here. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I would never choose to come back here. I would never choose this life. But I believe they absolutely did. And I believe that when you get to a place where you choose to not come back here, that's when you become a spirit guide and kind of guide other people in your soul group through the process.
I kind of tend to agree with you on a lot of that stuff, is where we kind of choose to come back and maybe even choose maybe a little bit of the circumstances of our birth, maybe to I don't know if I fully buy into like the whole karmic, I don't know what people refer to as like almost like a karmic punishment or
Right.
something like that, or balancing karma. I don't know if I 100% buy into that, but maybe let's just say someone abused their child in a previous life and they pass away and they feel very guilty about doing that. So in order to experience maybe what that was like for their child, they choose to go into a life where they're going to be abused themselves, just for like a random example.
Well, my definition of karma is very different from most people's. I don't think that it was ever meant to be perceived the way it is. I don't think, when people say, oh, you'll get your karma, they're envisioning like, well, this person did something I didn't like, so something bad is going to happen to them because the universe is going to punish them. I don't believe that we're ever punished for anything. What I believe is that everything is energy. And so if you're vibrating at this low vibration of pain, then of course your whole life you're going to keep experiencing pain. And when you're reborn, you're going to be reborn back into pain. You have to raise your vibration before you come back here, or you're going to be in the same kind of situation you were before. And it's not a matter of like you choosing to punish yourself or God or the universe punishing you. It's just that your vibration determines your experience of the world. So when someone is at a very low vibration, they get stuck here. They either get stuck as kind of trapped souls, or what we would call ghosts, where they get stuck coming back into a new life that's pretty much a repeat of the old. And, a lot of people tell me, like, well, that's, when I talk about past life karma, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about past life pain that hasn't been healed. That's karma to me. Karma to me is unhealed trauma that manifests into the outer world as drama. And I think that, some people they're telling, when I talk about past life karma that has to be healed, that's in the chakra system, you're carrying that past life karma or that trauma in your chakras. They're like, well, it's not fair that I'm coming into this new lifetime with past life karma because I can't remember my past life. How am I expected to learn from something that I can't remember? And first of all, I tell them, well, if you start doing the shadow work and the meditation and you start remembering your dreams, you will start clearing those chakras. First, you're going to start clearing childhood trauma from this lifetime, which we all have. Some people like to gaslight themselves and downplay and say, oh, I had a happy childhood. We all have some kind of trauma we're carrying, or else we wouldn't have any problems in our life. And we wouldn't have any emotional problems. We wouldn't have any financial problems. We wouldn't have relationship problems. We wouldn't have health problems. Everything would be fine if we weren't carrying some kind of trauma that was outwardly manifesting. And so once people start remembering all this childhood stuff and, remembering stuff that they didn't even know was influencing them anymore, and clearing up that stuff, they start having past life memories. They either start having it when they're meditating or they start having it in their dreams. There's past life memories definitely come back to them. But the other thing I tell people is, aside from saying yeah, you absolutely can remember your past life memories if you start opening your third eye, because that's where they are. But also, you don't really have to remember your past life. All you have to do is look at this one. If you're looking at this life and you're examining yourself and you're practicing self-reflection, that's going to tell you everything you need to know about your past life, because it's happening right now as well.
That's a very interesting way to look at it. And, you definitely could be right. What advice do you have for people to help raise their vibration and manage their chakras? Like, what if you could give people one piece of advice, what would it be?
That's such a great question, because I think a lot of people are confused. There's a lot of talk about raising your vibration, and people think that raising your vibration means feeling good. And so they're like, oh, when I listen to this song, or when I, have a ice cream sundae, or I go to the beach, I'm raising my vibration. And it's like, no, you're actually not. Your vibration is based on your consciously felt emotions. And so the only thing that's low vibrational is repressed or denied emotions. Even if you're angry and you're screaming and you're having a full-blown meltdown, or if you're crying your eyes out, that's high vibrational. People don't realize that. When you're going through a Kundalini Awakening or a dark night of the soul, there's a lot of crying, there's a lot of pain that you're feeling. And that is raising your vibration. And that's what I mean when I say, people come to me in times of crisis and they say, my life is falling apart. And I say, congrats, because that means that they're raising their vibration. When you raise your vibration and you become consciously aware of all the trauma you're carrying, you will no longer keep attracting people and situations that are trying to bring your conscious awareness to this trauma. So you'll no longer attract toxicity. The only reason we attract toxicity is so that we can bring our conscious awareness to the pain that we were already carrying long before we met that person or got in that situation. And so the only way to truly raise your vibration is to do the shadow work and to connect with all your shadow self with your shadow self and with all your unconscious emotions that you're carrying and that you're repressing and denying and burying. And when you do that, that is what raises your vibration. Every time you put on a mask and say you're happy when you're not, that's low vibrational. Like if someone invites me out for dinner and I don't really want to go because I want to stay home and read a book, and I accept the invitation, even if I go and I act like I'm having a great time, that's low vibrational because I'm ignoring my own emotions.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because people really think that, there's that high vibrational means only positive emotions that feel wonderful to feel. And they think like if you feel angry or sad or anything like that, that's low vibrational. And so they actually end up practicing this toxic positivity or this spiritual bypassing where they lie to themselves and tell themselves that they feel good, and they use these positive affirmations and they try to look on the bright side, and nothing ever changes. They just keep lying to themselves and saying, I love my life, everything is wonderful, when it's not, and they're clearly in distress. And they don't realize that that is keeping them stuck in a low vibration. Whereas if they were to actually get mad and say, I want something totally different for myself, that would instantly raise their vibration and it would instantly attract something different for themselves.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people in my life about how, a lot of people, friends and family, will really try to just kind of like dance around how they're feeling just to try to keep the peace and not hurt anybody's feelings. But there's a lot of times where I'll just be like, I would rather you just yell at me for a minute and tell me how you actually feel than just sit there and try to be all calm just for the sake of being calm.
Right, because when we ignore those feelings, they don't go away. They just fester and block the chakras. And it's so funny, like we really live in a culture where it's the norm to practice emotional repression. It's the norm. Like, I talk about how even babies are hushed. People get very, very uncomfortable with a baby crying in public when it's absolutely age appropriate. And we teach our children not to like throw a fit and not to express their emotions and to just be polite. And so when I have sessions with everyone, like every client that I have a session with practically ends up crying during the session and then apologizing. They're like, I'm sorry, I'm crying. And it's like, that's why you need these sessions, is because, if you go to a loved one, it doesn't matter. Like they will have good intentions for you, but they'll try to cheer you up. They'll do everything they can to get you to stop crying. And that's actually not helping you, when they try to cheer you up, they try to get you to look on the bright side, or they try to distract you, or we'll go out for drinks. I know what'll help you feel better. And it's like, people are afraid to cry.
Yeah, it's in my experience, it's more helpful if you could just get it out versus try to hide it. So I definitely can see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah.
So I know you have a website that people can go to if they are interested in working with their chakras or working out some of these chakra blockages, or doing a session with you. Do you want to plug your website?
I am going to have a blog where I talk about the chakras and I talk about the universal laws which work through the chakras. And people will be able to follow my postings and get new information and just kind of learn something new. And they'll also be able to book a session with me if that interests them.
That's perfect. And and I'll include that in the episode description as well. I really appreciate you taking some time to come on the show with me and talk about this. It's been really fascinating for me.
All right, thank you.
That's it for this episode. I'd like to thank Tia for coming on to the show and sharing her knowledge about chakras and energy. And I would like to thank you for tuning into the show. If you're interested in contacting Tia or checking out her site, she can be found at ko-fi.com/Tia Angelica Tucker. A link to her webpage can be found in this episode's description. If you liked this episode, I would appreciate you sharing it with someone you think would be interested. And remember, if you've had an experience and want to be on the show or just want me to tell your story, shoot me an email. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com, and I would love to have you on the show.